الو 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 No, tennis panelist. Okay. Yes. Good afternoon, man. Can you hear from your end? Can you please unmute your mic and let us know if you can hear us? Hello?
Hi.
Okay. The chair is not here right now, so we hope that we can actually start with the presentation. So in the next 2 minutes, you can start your own presentation. So we take a turn, then we move on to the question and answers. Is that taken?
All right. Yep.
Thank you very much, man. Thank you.
Can you please tell me if you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Is it okay if I start now?
Okay. Please start.
All right. So hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Chris, and I will be presenting some elements of my PhD research, which focused on the perpetuation of colonial violence among Black Africans. More specifically, I analyzed Black South Africans' violence against foreign Black Africans in South Africa. So xenophobia is the term commonly used to refer to the hostility toward foreign citizens in South Africa. However, that label hides the racial dimension of many, if not virtually all, xenophobic incidents recorded in South Africa, since they target racialized people and specifically foreign Black Africans. Such targeting reveals that in contemporary South Africa, the label foreigner is not attributed to any foreign citizen, but is specifically used to refer to Black Africans, which was also the case during apartheid. So for some context, European settlers declared themselves South Africans and denied the South African citizenship to indigenous Black Africans, therefore making them foreigners on their own land. With this backdrop, the use of terms such as xenophobia and foreigner might hint that the colonial past remains present. So since I just mentioned colonial past, when I talk about colonialism, I am referring to the process by which European powers sought to expand their geopolitical influence by exploiting non-European peoples and their resources, and by imposing European languages and cultures around the world. We cannot talk about colonialism without talking about othering. Othering is also a characteristic of whiteness, which Frankenberg defined as a structural positioning. So we're not talking about ancestry here, from which the white subject attributes to the other, which it will not attribute to itself, starting with the very concept of race. So for example, an ideologically white person might explicitly attribute a race to others, but they might not be so quick to do the same with themselves. Whiteness has also been described as a narcissistic pact. So that idea that ideologically white people are so convinced of their superiority that among themselves, they do not challenge such a belief. So if we put all these definitions together, and if we focus on the racial dimensions of Western colonialism can be approached as the culmination of narcissistic whiteness. And the decolonial approach, which is the approach that I mobilized, would require us to identify patterns of narcissistic whiteness and interrupt them. So with that decolonial approach in mind, my main research question was, what does an African-centered decolonial psychological analysis of this violence, so Black South Africans' violence against foreign Black Africans, what does it reveal about racial identities and racial relations among Black Africans on the continent? To answer this, I looked at the interwovenness of anti-Black narratives in participant stories, at structural violence, and at the impact of anti-Black violence on participants' racial identity. As you can see, I focused on Black people, and I want to explicitly stress that this choice does not imply that other racial groups are not complicit in their own way in this violence. What I sought to do was to center Black people's sovereignty and the unconditional leverages available to us to challenge the perpetuation of colonial violence. To reach out participants, I used the link you can see on the screen. The call for participants was made to both Black South African citizens and foreign Black African nationals with some familiarity with informal settlements. I reached out to local organizations to circulate the call, and eventually I spoke with 79 people, most of whom are foreign Black African nationals. I also spoke mostly with women, and as mentioned before, many participants were familiar with informal settlements, and many of them reported experiencing financial hardship, which transpires in the stories that you will hear. I conducted interviews during 6 months, and although that was not planned, I ended up doing all the interviews remotely. So there was a strong emphasis on orality since participants could not see me and I could not see them. For the analysis, I used the decolonial intersectional narrative framework. So in addition to asking myself, what are the stories that participants want to share, I also had to interrogate what those messages revealed about identities and power dynamics and how my own analysis and retelling could destabilize oppressive societal dynamics. This last point has been challenging because my analysis is necessarily subjective. So what I consider as challenging the oppressive status quo, someone else might read as adding to anti-Black narratives. So figuring out what resistance looks like in the specific context of this study has been challenging. Some quick definitions to make sure we have the same understanding. Race is not a biological concept that can notably be traced back to European modernity and that has been used to assert European hegemony. When I talk about Black people, I'm referring to people who have been dehumanized by global racist phenomena such as slave trades, colonialism, and ongoing coloniality. And when I talk about Africans, I'm talking about people whose ancestry can be traced back entirely or predominantly to the continent of Africa. So when you hear me say Black Africans, it is to acknowledge that there are Africans who are not Black, such as Amazigh people who are indigenous to the northern parts of the continent. So if we start with anti-Black narratives and how they are interwoven throughout participants' life stories, what I consistently observed was that to be Black was commonly framed as being the other and being eligible for colonial dehumanization. Participant stories commonly position being Black as undesirable because it often meant being mistreated in all impunity. More specifically, participants recounted mistreatment at the hands of people they describe as being of European and Indian ancestry in settings such as schools, churches, and workplaces, both in South Africa and in other African countries. Stories of workplace abuse really highlighted how capitalism is intertwined with racism and how those two systems themselves are connected to patriarchy, therefore resulting in a specific violence deployed against impoverished Black female workers, both in South Africa and in other African countries. As you can guess, given the topic of this research, I also documented stories about how Black Africans subject one another to dehumanizing treatment, and that dehumanization also transpires in the banalization of iterations of racist violence, such as colorism, for example. So one participant, let's call her Natalie, explained how she went from being second class in her country to being a foreigner in South Africa. I asked what second class meant, and Natalie explained that in her country, it meant second to Europeans. So she described a social hierarchy in which one is ranked based on their proximity to European skin color and hair texture, which is essentially a white supremacist hierarchy. And in our conversation, to me, it seemed that she was not questioning the colorist rationale in and of itself, but instead she was explaining how now that she is in South Africa, she no longer enjoys the privileges that her skin tone warranted her back home. So in her story, being Black was associated with being the undesirable other, whether that is because of one's skin tone alone or because one is both not a South African citizen and is Black, and will consequently be treated, or rather mistreated, as a foreigner in South Africa. Between the lines of all the stories was racial awakening and how one's racial identity might imply being subjected to racist violence. For the most part, these stories presented Black people through a colonial lens, which I argue speaks to colonial identity erosion. Now, moving on to my secondary question, which was about structural violence. All 76 foreign Black Africans who spoke with me described how they were reduced to a piece of paper and how any irregular administrative status that they might have was engineered by the very institutions that could have prevented it in the first place. Virtually all foreign Black African nationals also spoke to being scapegoated, and all described experiencing violence from institutions such as Home Affairs, the police, hospitals, and schools. Public hospitals in particular were narrated as sites of extreme violence against Black women, and specifically against impoverished foreign Black African women. So I'm about to share a story of coerced sterilization. So if you would rather not hear it, please feel free to take the appropriate measures. So Nandi shared this with me. They say sometimes they are closing before they're asking you. Because for us, they say we make too much babies and they don't want too much babies in their country. So here we can understand that Nende is talking about coerced sterilization. Several women I spoke with recounted similar stories, and what was striking to me is that they all used the exact same word, clothes, which I believe is a very visual representation of the objectification of Black women and the negation of their sovereignty over their own body. Now, one could be tempted to interrogate the veracity of the stories. However, I do not think that this is the mandate of decolonial qualitative research to start questioning stories from underrepresented marginalized groups. As per my analytical framework, my mandate is to examine what those stories reveal about intersectional identities, power, and oppression. And I think those stories crystallize colonial violence because they speak to racism, to patriarchy, and to capitalism. I do not know that stories of coerced sterilization are documented among non-racialized people. I do not know that they are frequently documented among men, particularly among European men, and I doubt that they are ever documented among wealthy people since they usually do not use public hospitals. Overall, in those stories, institutions were described as sites where state-sanctioned violence would be deployed in all impunity on the sole premise that the targets are foreigners in South Africa and supposedly deprived of any rights in that country. A similar rationale was also at play during apartheid to justify the violence against Black people. So those parallels led me to suggest that present-day so-called xenophobia could be approached as a hauntology of apartheid and consequently a hauntology of colonial white supremacist violence. So if we assume that the contemporary violence against foreign Black Africans is a hauntology of apartheid, how might a decolonial African-centered psychological analysis explain that? Based on stories shared with me, I argue that South African nationalism can, so it does not have to, but it can, act as a proxy to whiteness. And it can result in attributing to the non-citizen Black other what is not said about Black South Africans. As whiteness can also be linked to narcissism, as we discussed at the beginning, South African nationalism can fuel narcissistic whiteness, which is itself connected to Western colonial violence and consequently to apartheid. The fact that some Black South Africans can exert against other Black Africans a violence reminiscent of apartheid, to me, evokes possible trauma bounds stemming from colonial violence. So in Western psychology, trauma bounds can generally form between abusers and people who survived abuse. In practice, those identities are not necessarily mutually exclusive. It is not uncommon for people who survive abuse to also engage in abuse, sometimes simultaneously. Trauma bounds comprise 4 elements, all of which are identified in participants' narration of social dynamics between white European settlers and Black South Africans on one end, and between white European settlers and foreign Black African nationals, even before they arrived in South Africa on the other. I also identified these elements in the narration of Black South Africans' relationship, or lack thereof, with foreign Black Africans in South Africa. Practically, foreign Black Africans are reduced to being foreigners. They are promised some basic rights if they, quote unquote, do not commit crimes, which is a popular unfounded trope about foreign Black Africans in South Africa. Occasionally, they might succeed in their endeavors. So, for example, they might get their paperwork renewed. However, they still face devaluation for being a foreigner, which further erodes their identity. Such a colonial identity erosion might lead to a sense of inadequacy, which might in turn fuel the need to redress one's social status and ranking. Those 2 elements together constitute the premise of narcissism, according to Western psychology. And since narcissism can be connected to colonial violence, we might want to ask ourselves, despite how uncomfortable that might be, who might be the next target of this perpetuation of Western colonial violence? The last manifestation of violence that I looked into was the impact of Black Africans' violence against one another on participants' racial identity. In stories shared with me, I identified some disavowal of the Black racial identity. So a couple of participants made explicit statements such as this one: nobody likes to be called Black. Or this one: I wish to be another race. In those statements, what I identified was a sense of racial essentialism. So that idea that there's only one way to be Black, and that way was associated with being the undesirable other. I also want to highlight that virtually everybody I spoke with shared stories of violence that ran across generations. I believe this generational aspect highlights the decolonial imperative to break the cycle of colonial violence among Black peoples. To that point, I would like to share the following quote. One participant said about their Black racial identity, I've always rejected the racial classifications of the apartheid regime and of all colonial past. And very early in my life, I joined the Black consciousness movement and so identified as a Black person. So in this framing, being Black is connected to the political decision to discredit white supremacist colonial hierarchies and embrace the very racial identity that has been dehumanized during apartheid and ever since the colonial encounter. In this sentence, colonial identity erosion is seemingly prevented because the narrator refuses to adopt the colonial playbook, and they refuse to believe that there is anything undesirable about being Black. So that sentence, I analyzed it as an example of talking back to colonial violence, rejecting colonial ideals, and adopting rules that rehumanize Black peoples on our own terms. So this leads me to my last slide, which is a question for all of us. How can we address colonial identity erosion and talk back to colonial violence? Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much, man. So we go on to the next presentation. I should stand or come here. Actually come here, make a presentation. Okay. You said I stand. We'll try. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rashid Mbali Adebayo. I'm to narrate about navigating military coup in Africa, an holistic perspective, beyond sanction intervention, and broader thing. So now, I'll be using some things here as well. So, it will not only be my. But to start with, what we are trying to look at is that have a lot of coups in Africa for a very long time. So it has been a recurrent decimal. And why is it so? Is another dimension. But most of the time when there is coup, there are some measures put in place. So, and practically those measures are not working. That's why I want to take a look at what can be the solution, permanent solution, or the one that will reduce it to a high level. Now, a quick look at Europe or in North America. So basically, when you look at Europe, since when they have been put in European countries, so we have just few. Portugal in 1974. I put it in another dimension. So from the lowest to the Greece in 1967 and in Spain in 1936. North America in 1861, which is not even, why not a coup in the traditional sense? The secession of certain states and the ensuing civil war were acts of rebellion against the federal government. Now, back to Africa, where we are. Let me finish on the introduction. It is not against saying that the African continent has witnessed a tumultuous history marked by recurrent military coup that have disrupted governance, stability, and socio-economic development within the last 3 years, making it 4 years in this 2024. Africa has experienced military coup in about 7 different countries, namely Mali, we have 2 coups within 9 months. Guinea in 2021, Sudan in 2021 as well, Burkina Faso 2022, Gabon in 2023. And recently also we have another one in Niger in that same 2023. The conventional responses of imposing sanction, preventive measure, and external intervention are proving insufficient in addressing the underlying complexities and persistent challenges associated with these coups. There is a need for a more holistic and sincere approach. This paper endeavors to explore a more comprehensive and nuanced perspective of navigating military coups in Africa. Now,
To understand it properly, let's go a bit on historical context. We have military coup in Africa. Military coup in Africa have been rooted in multifaceted socio-political and economic grievances. Most of these coups are as a result of active symptoms of poor and authoritarian governance. It often stems from dissatisfaction with governance, corruption, electoral fraud, constitutional violation, economic disparities, and the concentration of power. What we want to find out here is actually these are the symptoms that normally lead to coup in Africa, which most of the time there is no way you trace coup without seeing all these things. In the Sahel nation, it has been burdened by a low social and economic development level, human rights abuse, etc. Examining historical instances provide crucial insights into the recurring patterns and shed light on the interconnectedness of various factors leading to this overview. Economic hardship can create a climate of instability that makes it more likely. When people are struggling to make ends meet, they may be more receptive to call for a new government. Unfortunately, these coups have devastating impact on African development and stability. They always lead to violence, human rights abuses, and economic instability. They can also undermine democratic institutions and make governance a very difficult task. Now, unpacking the root cause. Poorly explained in his book, the process of democratization has been marked by the formation of political parties, ringing and winning elections, and state capture by a few elites. That is, the few elites are always in charge of the power, and they want to remain in that particular position, not even considering whether the masses are in the right position or they are not making any end meet. Their own is just the power. And the moment there is power between them, there is going to be a disparity. So, and when there is no fair distribution of wealth, there is going to be agitation by the people. Now, socio-political grievances, including lack of inclusive governance, when some people have been marginalized, when they cannot participate, when they cannot even be at the table where their life has been discussed, is going to lead to some kind of crisis. Inclusive governance and the suppression of dissent opinion. Some people actually may have a different opinion, but when their opinion are not being tabled or they are not tolerated, it's going to lead to some kind of differences, and it can lead to anything. A significant contribution to the vulnerability of African nations to military coup. When all these things, these paraphernalia comes together, it can actually lead to a military coup. Economic disparities exacerbate social tension, fostering an environment conducive to political instability. It makes environment ripe for political instability. Government issue as weak institution, authoritarian regime, and flawed electoral processes amplify risks of coup. Now, let us take a look at this particular map. The first one said coup attempts on military-dominated regime in Africa. This is the map. Every area here is where the military dominated. And even within the military-dominated area, there are still attempts coup. The red signifies even when the military are the ones dominating them. Some people are still in the position that they want to stage another coup. So it makes it more or less very difficult, even where there is coup. Because the essence of a coup was, okay, maybe a particular governance or a particular government in power were not doing, sorry, a particular democratic government were not doing in a normal way. So other people stage a coup. And even at the end of the day, there is other military too that still want to stage another coup, even within the military coup. So what we are saying is, okay, if we thought this is the solution, why are other people still coming up that still want to take that same power? So it becomes a problem. Now, the second map, countries in Africa with the highest numbers of coups since 1952. Only Burkina Faso has 10 attempts, 1952 till date. And now we have Burundi that has 11 attempts. Niger and Benin Republic has 8 attempts. We have Sudan with 17. Sudan with 17 attempts. Sierra Leone 10, Ghana 10. So automatically, what are the indices that cause all these particular things? That virtually most of the African countries, there is always an attempt of coup. There is always an attempt of coup. And in all these coups, I deliberately, even in the recent coup, you know, Abacha coup is in 1993, but I deliberately removed all those ones. I practically started from 2020 downward, which is 7 nations combined, starting from Mali down to the last one, which is Niger. So to make the study, but this one is just to give us an holistic perspective of what has been happening ever since. Now, this is another one. This is map of Africa. Now, in all these colors signify countries with what we call authoritarian regime. Now, make no mistake, when we say authoritarian regime, they may call it democracy, but looking at the style of the government, we are going to know that it is nothing short of democracy at all, at all. Now, all these Niger, Mali, all those ones, they are under what? Authoritarian regime, whereby they may call it an element, they may call it democracy or whatever name they want to call it, but one person is all, or the elite are the one making all the decisions without allowing, even opposition don't have a say. So it's a very, very difficult terrain. And now, aside from that, we have the hybrid regime. Now, this one is more or less like where we like to deceive ourselves, that we are actually operating democracy. But at the end of the day, it's just total flaw. Now, I will go through this particular thing so that for people to really understand what we mean by that one. So I want to give more definition to hybrid. Now, when we talk about hybrid regime, so we are talking about a nation whereby they operate as a democratic nation, but there's no freedom of the press. The opinions of the opposition doesn't count. So when some people call themselves civil society or civil liberty or whatever they are saying will never count. And that's exactly what led to what we call NSAS in Nigeria, even though other people hijacked it. But to be sincere with ourselves, the people that started what we call NSAS are not the one that destroyed the nation. Yeah. They were people that have a genuine reason. There is police brutality, whereby police can kill people at will, and people are tired of it. So they want a change. They want something that will change. But despite the fact that there has been pronouncement that, okay, there is no more SARS, there is no more this thing keep on recurring. That's why they call themselves together and they stage a protest somewhere where it was calm. And I think what later led to the problem was because of the fact that the military went there on the 20th of October, 2020, to go. I know there is a lot of debate. I don't want to dabble into that one. So people will say, no, they did not shoot. No, they did not do anything. No, nobody died. But the truth of the matter, that was the last straw that broke the camel arm. Normally, in every society, one of the problems of protest is some people are hell-bent on hijacking it. If 20 people stand up here now, they are going to the gate, chanting, we no go green peacefully. We have some touts, rascals that want to join them, not for any other thing. They want to loot, they want to destroy, and they want to take people's property. So it's an avenue for them. And that's exactly what happened during the NSAS. And the government is clinging on the fact that it is those NSAS that destroy. No, we should tell ourselves the bitter truth. Nobody will say what the police are doing is actually the right thing. So now, when we talk about hybrid, it is never democracy. It is just a way of telling ourselves, deceiving ourselves, and that is what they call. Now, we have the last one, which is flawed democracy. Flawed democracy is actually democracy. It is. But everything that stands with democracy are mixing. What we can call democracy in that particular system are mixing. They will have a proper election. But at the end of the day, it is not the popular person that will emerge. At the end of the day, it is not even what the party say this is the right person that will emerge. It's just going to be a bunch of 2 or 3 people sitting down somewhere, nominating somebody. And at the end of the day, it will be that particular person that is going to emerge. But at the end of the day, because they presented the person, whether you like it or not, and they said there is an election, so they call it democracy. So I want us to understand that particular aspect very well, so that we are not going to, I don't want us to mix the authoritarian, this one and the flawed democracy. That's why I'm trying to clarify it in that way. So they may call themselves democracy, but at the end of the day, you notice that what they tell us, it is far from what democracy is all about. Now, let me still go a bit further about explaining those ones, so you are going to understand it. Now, flawed democracy is a type of political system that, while maintaining some features of a full democracy, has significant weaknesses in its democratic process and institution. Key characteristics of flawed democracy are election, just like what I mentioned. Regularly scheduled election occur and opposition party can participate. However, this election might be marked by issues such as corruption, voters intimidation, or media bias. And they are going to allow all these things to happen, but at the end of the day, the real election did not happen. So it's not a matter of, the problem with authoritarian is there is not even opposition to contest. There is not even anybody to come and say anything. But in a flawed democracy, they are going to exist. In an hybrid democracy, yes, they have somebody that is ruling, but there is element of suppression of other opinion. But in a flawed democracy, even when there is an opposition, there is nothing. Now, civil liberty. Citizens generally enjoy a broad range of civil liberty, but there may be significant problems such as infringements on freedom of speech, assembly, or press. In a flawed democracy, all these associations will exist, but at the end of the day, they are more abstract. Now, governance. There are often issues with governance, including inefficiency, corruption, and lack of transparency, political culture, rule of law. All these things are things that, at the end of the day, they are not existing. And now, let us take a look at it. We have full democracy. And how many countries in Africa have full democracy? We can see it with the map. And we can say the full one are just Botswana, Base, and the Mauritius. Those are the. Oh, well. It can be. Nigeria is hybrid. Yeah, Nigeria is hybrid. Yeah, there may be context based on what actually happened recently in this particular place. But notwithstanding, when we talk about people coming to vote or people contesting, it actually happened. I deliberately don't want to talk about Nigeria, but let's go a bit far. Now, during the regime of just Lagos State, for example, during the regime of Sanwo-Olu and Ambodi, some of us who are in Lagos will actually see what happened. We are not being biased to anybody. People, there may not be many people that say, okay, we want to vote for Ambodi. We saw what happened. People are being flogged. People are being chased away. So automatically, so it's a different thing that somebody contested and he did not win because it is not popular. But it's a different thing that even the little people that want to vote for that particular person were not allowed. But no matter what, they were not allowed. And the police were there, they couldn't do anything. But some of them are even unaccomplished. So we are not dwelling into that particular one. Now, let us take a look at what we really want to discuss. It's a very long book. I just tried to summarize some of the points here. Now, what are the major things that normally cause problems? Or let us take a look at the recent one that I mentioned, recurrent coup in Africa, recent coup in Mali, Guinea, Sudan, Burkina Faso, and Gabon, and even recently, Niger. Now, limitation of conventional responses. Historical contrast, root causes, governance issues, corruption, electoral fraud, economic disparity, and economic hardship. I've mentioned that one. Now, let us unpack the rules. Socio-political grievances. People are angry about the kind of governance that is going on. People are not happy. Maybe they were not carried along or whatever. There is suppression of dissent opinion, economic disparities, and social tension. Today, a lot of people will tell you there is no money in Nigeria, but still a lot of people will tell you there is money in Nigeria. Some people find it difficult to spend 1,000 naira to eat at a sitting, and some people can blow 1 million just in the weekend. So automatically, that gap is too wide. And when there is economic disparity, people are angry, and people want to lift their hand to any other person they see. And that's why today, having a bit of, if you can feed yourself in Lagos State, somebody that can feed himself become entitled to you. He wants to take your property or whatever by force. That is exactly what happens. You can be walking on the road and somebody will just approach you. Alaye, give us that phone. He wants to sell it. And at the end of the day, what will you use it? So now, we are not using that one to justify the criminal because we have criminal. But the truth of the matter is, there are a lot of people suffering because there is economic disparity. We all know what happened about palliative. Despite the fact that some people are governors, they took palliative. People that couldn't feed themselves did not even see that particular palliative. And people were angry. People went as far as hijacking Dangote truck, which under normal circumstances is criminal, or criminal mentality is still criminal. But people are still justifying that one, the fact that, okay, this man is enjoying from the government. So that is what caused economic, and if there is economic disparity, people justify anything. Whether Dangote is taking money from the government or not shouldn't be concern of anybody. You to go and take it. But the moment it has been visible, it becomes a problem. Now, I know my time is going. Now, case study. Guinea, for example, what are the things that led to the Guinea problem? Constitutional change and autocratic rule. It led to it. For some of us that know that one, I don't have much time. Crackdown on protest and opposition. So there was even the people that are protesting. They were being manhandled. Some of them killed. Other regional and international responses. That's another one. The international intervention is also a problem that we have. We have heard or we have seen a situation whereby a particular country, because of their own personal interest, will support a particular group just to topple a particular government. So maintain their own hegemony. We have heard this one about most of the francophone countries, whereby they will tell you that, okay, this is what you are doing. We are not going to that particular because now another one is Sudan. Power struggle between military factions. In their own camp, it was even the military that were fighting themselves. So who is going to be in power? Transition to civilian rule challenges. Sometimes, because another government is going, another one is supposed to come, and the problem of maybe Godfather or whatever will lead, at the end of the day, the military will come and take power. And that is exactly what happened in Sudan. Rising tension and international reactions. Now, the Burkina Faso, government failure to address security challenge. There was security challenge, and government were more or less like, just like some kind of security challenge we have in this particular country recently. So food insecurity is still part of the problem. And if people are not, okay, coup leader strategies action, humanitarian crisis displacement, and now we have Gabon, long-time ruled by Bongo family. We know that that particular country is still ruled by one family. In fact, it was still even a cousin or whatever of that particular family that took the power. Recent coup on political dynamic, electoral controversies, and like trend on dynamic, decline in coup governance and rise in coup, external influences and geopolitical interest, recurring pattern and so, proposed framework, conclusion, addressing economic and social inequality, strengthening democratic institutions, promoting inclusive political participation, security sector reform, regional and international cooperation, overcoming neo-colonialism for sustainable development. I think I will stop here so that other people will. Thank you. Yeah.
We have Mrs. Titila in the house, surely. Titila in the house. So we have 30 minutes left for this session. So we call on to Mrs. Ikoma for our presentation. Then let's take note of the question. So we have 10 minutes for the question and answer. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rosetta Ikomansi. I'm presenting this paper. It is a transgenetic narratological study of an initiation rite from Ohafia. So I'm looking at this rite of passage for young boys between the age of 12 and 7. You know, it's kind of preparing them into the journey of manhood. Now I'm seeing it is a rite of passage that prepares the Ohafia young boy to enter into the world of masculinity. But looking at the rite of passage, I discovered that there is an interwovening of the 3 genres of literature within this rite of passage, although it's a cultural performance. But the 3 genres of literature are clearly discernible, and they are tied together in such a way that it's an amalgamation, and it's difficult to lose them apart. Once you do, so, well, first, the Ohafia Igbo people found in Abia State of Nigeria, spread over 25 villages that are divided into 9 autonomous communities. There is cultural homogeneity of the Ohafia, and it is evident in the uniformity of everything they do, the gods, their system of values, which is manifested in various rites and passage. Rites of passage is a practice within their culture. So now, although there is a high level of communality within the Ohafia culture, there are also individualistic traits. Ohafians were known as warriors of the past, missionaries and all that. They were always warfare, and so the emphasis is on raising men who will be able to go in there and fight and protect their territory, while women were just raised to give birth to more warriors. So that is the setup of the Ohandian society. So this paper looks at the Obon, a real-life rite of passage that celebrates the initiation of preteen boys into the process of attaining masculinity, in a tribal society such as Mafia. The rite contains series of tales, and it's central to the nature and structure of the Ohandia society because it helps to define different components of society, particularly the masculine components. Now, I'm going to try to be fast because I don't have much time anyway. So now, the problem here is that the rites of passage are interesting narratives of the Ohandia culture, which constitutes the story of both individual and group social development in line with age-long traditions of the people. But observers are usually not able to grasp the depth of the rite. And so this study tries to put the rite under the organizing principle of the story, because the story is the most central part of the entire, everything revolves around the story. So in realizing the need, okay, well, okay, so go to the next slide. So think I've done this here. So now, if you look at the traditional Igbo literature, most of the works that have been done were all about collecting, categorizing, putting them in categories. Just a few of them bother to even go into real analysis. So we are trying to do an analysis of this rite from a literary perspective, to kind of create a new path. Because not only that we're looking at the rite as literature, showing the traditions tied together, we're also looking at traditional enactment as a story. Next slide, please. We are using the theory of narratology. Narratologists look at events that happen and then look at how it is presented. First, the story, which is the thing that happens that you want to narrate, and then the mediation, how this story is carried forth, to the reader. So we are looking at it from that point of view. Now, the Obon is a secret court, and we are seeing it as drama. From the very beginning, the Obon initiation ritual presents several media whose products are outgrowths of the modern genres of literature. From the very beginning of the performance, you will see a day before the performance, actually, all the women within the compound where it is being staged are left indoors. They cannot come out because they do it actually nude. So you are not supposed to see it. You are a woman, you can't see it. If you see it, you are in trouble. So from that time that the time that the town crier goes about to tell that this thing is being staged and the ceremony has started. So that's the kind of prologue to the story that is about to unfold. The women are indoors and the boys are out there. And then a certain group of boys will follow the celebrant. There's a picture, there's an image I have there. Maybe you should go to the image. You will see them jumping up and down, dancing energetically. This is the celebrant here in the middle, and all these are his friends. So they will trudge like that to the compound where the thing is going to happen. And when they enter into the OB and start the heavy drumming that follows the rite, the story is beginning, the plot in the story is beginning to open itself up. And gradually within the rite, as it is going on, all sorts of things are going on. There are characters. Because the initiate himself and all his people are all characters. And of course, you have the seen and unseen. It is expected that the ancestors are there watching. It is expected that gods and goddesses are there. So there are so many characters within the setting. Although the setting is basically in the compound OB, but it is assumed that the entire compound itself is a set. Because the women indoors are not coming out, are also part of the entire thing. They are also acting in some sort of way. And while they are there, there's so many chants, incantation, libations, they have to call up the spirits, particularly the boy that is performing. They will call up what we call Nana, somebody who is named after, because in the Ohantia, naming is a very serious matter. You don't just give a name. You name your child either to reflect the spirit of a dead relative or an ally or a friend, So they call up the spirit, and then the head or the head of the Obon within that compound, because every compound have their own court. We now do the invocation, and the boy will come and kneel. I wasn't able to enter into the OB because, of course, I'm a woman, but I had to acquire some people that are part of the court to help me hide some cameras, and I was able to capture it. So they have to kneel, and then they do a lot of things. The ritual is done, and they finally tell the boy the secret. And you cannot hear it because they whisper it into his ear. And the moment they whisper the secret of the unborn into his ear, he jumps up, and then the entire thing has reached its peak. We are looking at a drama now that has reached the peak. And there's so much that is shown. So I'm saying that from the announcement of the event by the OEU or Herald in the compound, the evening before the actual day of the ritual serves as a prologue for the rite, while the drumming that will already begin from sundown on the day of the rite to the day to set the plot moving. And then the plot develops into the expository stage when the members of the friends of the celebrant listen, like we saw in the image, to the place where it's going to take place. And that's the expository space. The urban core group engages in the energetic dance. There is invocation, libation, and all sorts of things, and the address of the dead who are expected to be there watching. And finally, the denouement and resolution, which is the normal thing we see in every drama, comes up when they finally tells him, and the whole thing releases cathartic feelings of emotion, which is the normal thing we expect to see in a dramatic presentation. So in this way, we see everything. Of course, the poetic aspect of the rite comes from all the verbalization in form of addresses, invocations, libations, and every other thing. And then the narration, of course, is there. Within the verbalization, you see the story of the boy, what is expected to be. They will come out and call him by his name and address him and tell him that he's going to be like his age mates. He will not lag behind. He will represent, say a lot of things that is expected, the trajectory with which his life should take as an Ohafia born. So that is the story that is emanating from Rice. So in this way now, we have been able to see the story, which is the main central thing. And within that story, we have seen the dramatic aspect, and we have also seen the poetry, which is in form of the verbalization. So you agree with me that the rite is an amalgamation of the three genres of literature interwoven together in a formal whole. Thank you very much.
Wow. That's a short presentation. You see how like all right, let's see if we have one of our panelists online. Okay. Yeah. One of the attendees here, okay. So sorry, a question. All right. Right now we move on to the question and answer.
The last speaker.
The question. Okay. Actually, we are waiting for the last speaker. Mrs. Titi Layo Shoremi. She's not here. Neither is she online. For now, until she joins us, we continue. So this was the question and answer, right? So do you have any questions? We'll start with you, sir.
Questions for them. All right. That presented online. Yeah. I hope Christiana is still online.
Mom, are you still with us? Are you still with us? You just
Okay. Is Christiana still online with us?
I am. I hear you.
Okay, that is great. Yeah. Now, going back into your presentation and then talking about self, the otherness, the binary of whiteness, and all the problems. Now, and of course, from all the discussions we've been having around these binaries and the implications, what do you think is the way forward from all these problems, especially within that consciousness of self versus others? Is there a way out of it, or that is just how we're going to be grappling with that, and then we won't get out of it, especially within the this concept of Timbuktu, even there in South Africa? Is there any way that that can mediate this crisis of self and otherness? That is to you. I go to Mr. Adebayo now. Mr. Adebayo, within Nigerian context now, people are already asking for food. Yes. Seriously? Yeah. People are already asking for food. At least I've seen people that say, look, we need military again. We need military again. We need military again. Now, from your own research, what do you think is wrong with the political elite? Why is it that they are not learning? or they seems not to be assimilating what they should assimilate, because the masses are already really tired. And I think the state is volatile as we speak now. Though personally, I won't ask for coup, especially because of what I know of military. But majority of people are already asking for coup. Then I come to Madam Ifeoma. I want to raise a question of the ethical implication of what you did, because now you planted camera through some people who were supposed to be part of the force. Okay, so don't you think there is ethical implication in that? And then even those people who accepted to do it, who were member of the court and took camera from you and planted secret camera to record their own court, did you tip them? What is it that they collected from you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, first and foremost,
No, yeah. So then the second one is that is there any way that modernity, like Christianity or Islam or whatever, is renegotiating this cultic initiation? Okay, thank you.
Okay, we take more questions. I hope the speakers are taking note of the questions. All right, okay, let's start from the last. Sorry.
Okay, my question is for the last two presenters. For Mr. Adebayo, it's not more of a question, it's just like observation. When you started, I have to be very sincere, I was lost. I was thinking like, where are we going to? But when we started talking about when you showed that the image of the map and the coup, then I came alive, like, oh, seriously? So some countries have observed coup for like 17 times. That's serious. So my question is, my question is in a way, like, do you think our researches, our talk and everything can really provide solution to how these things will not happen again? Because it should not be a situation of talking. I'll leave that for you. And for Mrs. Ifeoma, I enjoyed your presentation, even if I have to step outside. As a literary person, I'm a poet, and I was listening when you said the three genres of literature. So I was looking at, okay, is it the chanting, oral poetry, okay, the drama, then which one is the third one? Please don't answer me now. Okay, the narrative. Okay. Finally, when I was looking at your methodology, I saw participation. But when I came back into the house, I hear about the camera. When I heard participation in Yoruba culture, when they are doing the oral, a woman that comes out is in trouble. And you're a woman, and you said women don't take part. When I heard participation, I'm like, oh, I'm really interested. I want to know how you got that. Probably the camera would have answered that. Thank you.
Okay. There's another question. We take everything together. Should we actually just take two people the response? All right, so we'll start with the response. Miss Kushina, are you still there with us?
Yes,
All right,
I
please
am.
start. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the question. So the way forward, I don't think I have a all ready to use solution to share, but I do think that reclaiming identities outside of the colonial paradigm is a key step, because when we are within the colonial paradigm, you necessarily have to other the people around you, right? It's because you can dehumanize them, that you can colonize them, that you can be so violent, that you can brutalize them, that you can essentially treat them as if they are not a person, right? Because you attribute to them what you wouldn't attribute to yourself. So I think there is something there about thinking of ourselves outside the colonial paradigm. And that implies learning, or rather relearning, who we were before colonialism, right? Because we had societies, we had social dynamics that were not necessarily constructed around that dehumanization and around that colonial violence. So I think there are resources there. And I also think that learning from other indigenous peoples around the world who have been resisting colonial violence can also be very instructive in terms of reclaiming identities and being able to have sovereignty over who we are and how we want to treat one another, rather than remain in the same colonial paradigm, even if we name it in a different way, remaining in the same rationale that just makes us try to dehumanize the people who might not look like us or whom we might not want to be associated with because we have been told that they are inferior to the colonizers. I hope that answers your questions.
All right.
The next question is for her.
It's for
him. It's for him.
Yeah. I think. Well, you asked in my own perspectives. What did I think about the fact that even in Nigeria today, people are asking for a coup already? And I can simply answer that one by saying that we are going to have a better Nigeria the day we start treating human as human. The day we did not subject them to what we subject animals to. Even in the developed world, animal has their rights. But in Nigeria, that right has been mixing. And secondly, until when we try to reduce the influence and power of political offices, the way they become rich suddenly, we are still going to have problems. So everybody wants to attain power because of the lucrativeness that it is, until when we try to remove that one, so that people know that when they are going there, they are actually going to go and serve the country, not they are going to go and amass the wealth. So the moment people start seeing a political office as a lucrative, we are still going to continue to have that particular kind of conversation. And using Nigeria as a case study with what is currently happening, right? The scholars are into two different opinions. Now, okay, those two policies that caused the chaotic must have been redesigned in a way that the problem shouldn't have been this bad. Why some people say there's no any right time, this is the time to do it. Well, we have a divergent opinion about that particular one, but I think it is that policy that makes things to be very difficult, coupled with the fact of the problem that we have experiencing prior to that particular one, like insecurity. We know food already, even if there is no removal of fuel subsidy or the FX, whatever, there is still going to be food insecurity in Nigeria based on the atrocity of the insecurity, either from the far north or whatever. But the fact that those ones are on ground and there is removal of fuel subsidy and the FX has created that particular dynamic of problem, and nobody is ready to what? To wait. So basically, so let me ask now to your own question. I think it's a bit related, but so did I think that research and virtually, well, one of our problems is until the foreign intervention actually did not allow our wealth to be transporting into their own country, perhaps we may not have the kind of conversation like this. The people that are corrupt, the people that are stealing our wealth, they take it to somewhere. And until it is being stopped. Now, today, we said, I gave you the country in the Europe and the America. They don't have coup. And why? Because of the stability, which, by the way, some people made us understand that that stability is what the... Okay?
Don't think that the white will sit here and allow Africa to be here. They won't sit there because they need a market where they can dump their things.
And we have the leaders that will also want to benefit from that particular. That's why everything boils down to system. If we don't have a system that works, it's going to be a problem for us. I think it's a continuous conversation. Sorry.
All right, so you
Okay.
response to the question.
Yes. First of all, the question of the ethical issue raised concerning my means of data collection. Yes, because it's a ritual and there are some esoteric, undertones surrounding it. I, as a woman, can't even come out. But I went through a lot of things, in fact, there were 11 rites of passage that I collected. It was really tough. It took me like 6 years or 5 years to collect the entire 11 rites that I actually worked on. So, but because there was a way we followed it through the village, the Igwe, that's the village head and everything. We tried to explain that it was for research work. I wasn't going to, enter there. In fact, I didn't see the videos, actually. So I wasn't supposed to. Yes, I wasn't supposed to see them as a woman. So the people that collected it, I paid them. Oh, they were actually like research assistants. I had to pay them for them to smuggle in the camera to record it. And then when it was recorded, my elder brother had to go through the video.
Not you.
Not me. I didn't see the film at all. I cannot see the film. It's unborn. I cannot know the secret of unborn as a woman. And besides, I have twins. There's also a lot of things tied to it. A mother of a twin cannot even come near. Yeah.
The mother of a twin cannot.
The mother of a twin, for instance, cannot sleep in my compound today, but cannot cook there, and she cannot see those things. So I didn't see it. But when it was collected, my elder brother saw it and then gave me a kind of summary of what went down. But I listened to the sound, basically the drumming, and then to get the verbalizations I needed for the poetic aspect and the dramatic aspect. And I had the only thing that I saw was those boys when they were still going there, because I was watching them. I saw when they passed through, because they have to come through the forest road. That's where the picture was taken before they now pass through where people are living and enter into the OB. So I didn't see it, so I cannot dare to look at such things.
Just see.
Yes.
Okay.
Even your brother that saw the video had access to see the live performance as a man.
Yes, he has done his own a long time ago.
Okay, so does he really need to see the video again? He should just have told you the story.
No. Yeah, it's a research work that I'm doing. I needed fresh, I needed him to get it for me. It was necessary that I get it. Yeah. It's been a long, this is something that he did. He's almost 60. He's almost 60. They do it before they are 12 years. Well, I have secondary access. Yeah. And then there was another question. Sorry. There's another question. He asked me about. He said, where is the place of Christianity and modernity in the culture? Yes. In my place, 90% of my people are Presbyterian church goers. There's church all over the place. But one thing about Ohafia is that not a single thing in our culture has been shifted.
Yes.
The church will not disturb it. Even the catechist son will do this initiation.
You are very correct.
Yeah. Because you see, even though in the olden time, when following this one, the trajectory is that when you reach a certain age, it's expected you get a human head to present to your age grade. Now they don't do it anymore. Okay, they don't panic about that. Yeah, they don't do that anymore. But it is expected. This is just a kind of putting the young man on the road to heroism. And our heroism now is, getting the money from business, academic accomplishment, all other things, but not that other one that we used to do. So it has nothing to do with that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So we move on to the second phase of the question. So we start. So we take other three questions. Thank you.
Thank you. My question goes to the last presenter. I still want to ask about the initiation. I don't know if you are familiar with this fattening room. Okay, that's another kind of okay. So if I want to compare in a way the essence of that passage rights. So I'm happy that I'm seeing this from the male aspect, because most times in order to make it gender equal, we always think that women are being that are facing this. Thank God that I'm witnessing this for the men also. I want to ask, what are the impacts of these rights on these young boys into the society? For example, the fattening room for the women, they prepare them in terms of the marriage, how to behave when they get married, the sexual, all those things. So more like when you hear this kind of thing with all the women that pass through this passage, you will hear from them that hardly will you see such women that another woman will snatch their husband. And that is an impact to the kind of marriage in their society. So I want to ask, what are this role of this passage right to some of these boys, and at the same time to the so-called the men in that society? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. My question is to Christian. Yes. Okay. Are you still here with us, Christian? Hello, Christian. Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Okay, my question is directed to you. So, you talked about the violence foreign Black Africans face in South Africa. I I'm examining a South African writer, Zoe Wycombe, and she talks about violence and I would say racial segregation targeted at the colored in South Africa because she's colored. She looks visibly white, but she's colored. And she talks about being neither black nor white, being in that kind of what Omi Baba will call an in-between situation. So I don't know if you can shed more light that the violence is not just targeted to maybe Nigerians or Ghanaians in South Africa who South African people feel are coming in to take their wealth or something like that, but also targeted to people who feel they are part of South Africa. They have a claim to South African history, but they are neither taken as black nor white. So I would really want you to talk about that. And then this last one.
Minister, we take more questions and you answer that. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth. My observation or question is to Mr. Rashid. Am I correct in saying Mr. Rashid, or did I say Dr. Rashid? Okay. So in the observation I want to make, can we look at the historical issues? Because there's a saying that he who doesn't know his history cannot go forward. Can we look at our historical background? Look at our colonial masters, the policies and the foundations they laid before leaving. Can we say that it has contributed and it is still contributing to the issues we have in Africa? One, the countries you pointed out that have these coups and all, what was the political climate like before the incursion of the colonial masters? Of course, there were disagreements and there were fights and all, but intertribal was, but to what extent? And then when they came in, I'm saying this because I know that the British colonial masters have a very negative governing policy of the minority uneducated ruling over the majority educated. That is what divided Sudan, and it still divided Sudan. You know, they put the minority over. And the same thing happened in Nigeria too. Anywhere they go to, that is the divide and rule policy. And when they are leaving a land that is discontent, that is dissatisfied, economically disparate. Everything you talk about in contemporary times, they left it behind as their passing legacy. So I don't know if it is reflected in the work, but it would be nice to have it so that we can have a full context of what we are talking about and how it is affecting us now. Then when you talk about the coup and how everything is being, neo-colonialism, I think someone said something to that effect. You look at colonialism now, it's in a different phase. It is still the same thing, the same game, but new players. They are fermenting troubles, and then people who do not have better sense of judgment are being enabled. And then the same thing, people are gaining, like our said, people are gaining over there. So can we see how we can reflect the historical background of this country? Because if you look at it, it's not really a one single fault. It's not really a one single issue.
All right, the last question. Okay.
Yeah.
Observation.
Since Amasio is my name, my question is to Christian. Now, when you talk of racial discrimination, racial segregation, and then this thing called xenophobia, they all seem to have the same meaning, which boils down to racial dissatisfaction. That's what I think about it. Now, in looking at this new concept, now how is there a remedy to it? Do you think there's a remedy to it of this of same race or same color fighting his own color? That's one. Then my second question is directed at you. Anywhere now in Nigeria, for example, we've tested the two aspects. We've tested, okay, or let me say three. We've tested colonialism, we've tested military coup, we've tested democracy. So now, but yet there's still the agitation for for the military takeover. But wherever the military discourse come in place, usually there are no juxtaposition for them. But scholars will tell us that sometimes the benefits of military regime outweigh that of democracy. Now, coming to these three aspects, is there can we come out looking at our own historical environment? Can we come out with something that can help our environment? Thank you.
Okay. No, it's not a question. Good afternoon. My name is Brenda. It's not a question. So for these courses like this, I've enjoyed most of the sessions that I've partaken in so far. For discourses like this, most people that are involved in it, they're all they're all in the academia. And if you are, giving solutions to societal problems and things like that, I would think that people that are at the helm of affairs, if not, of course, all of them don't go fit here, but at least like somebody that can even take a few of these things that are being said into consideration, because this is one academic person telling one academic person to the next academic person. So who is going to implement whatever discourse we are having here at the top level? That's my own.
Thank you very much. We have 6 minutes, so each speaker has 2 minutes to respond to the questions. So we start with Ms. Christina from online. Then we start. All right, then please start. Ms. Christina, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I just didn't want to interrupt. So thank you for the question. So definitely violence in South Africa is not limited to the violence between Black South Africans and foreign Black Africans, right? However, this is the topic I focused on, so this is what I can, discuss. Now, since you mentioned the point about violence directed toward colored folks in South Africa, to me, the way I see it, I think it speaks to just the harm that white supremacy and racial classifications have caused, right? Because when you have hierarchies, you create a ranking. So that person who is mixed is essentially marginalized by several groups, right? Whether that is by European folks or by Black folks who have been marginalized by European folks, right? And ultimately, I think what it highlights is just the divide and rule logic of colonialism, right? You create categories and then you pit those categories against one another and you don't have any cohesion. So I think what that makes me think when I hear about, that kind of violence is again how the premise of racism is to allow the colonial project to function. So I think to challenge that, it's important to discredit the racist and the racial classifications that exist, so that instead of maintaining those hierarchies and maintaining the marginalization among those groups, we try to think of ourselves as a people who are trying to survive colonial violence. That's one. And the point about racial dissatisfactions, that's the first term I hear that term actually. And I think, to me, it makes me think that maybe, and that's connected to what I said earlier, one way to move forward is to realize or to ask ourselves, to what extent are we looking at one another through a colonial gaze? When I look at another person, another Black African person, am I looking at them through a colonial gaze? Am I ranking them based on their skin color, based on a colonial borders, that were drawn by people who are not even African and who didn't even care about the interest of Africans, right? Am I looking at them based on ethnicities that have been colonially engineered to divide and conquer? You know what I mean? So I think we have to ask ourselves, when we look at one another, through which lens are we looking at one another? And I think the moment we decide to no longer normalize, again, go back to either the systems that were there before colonialism or new systems that we can invent that unite us and make us challenge the colonial hierarchies and colonial ambitions, I think that's when we can start creating some change, because we're essentially changing the rules of the game instead of, perpetuating colonial violence.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, I will try.
Now, concerning colonial influence in coup in Africa, I think, like I said, it's a very huge book which has been addressed. But before talking about the colonial, let us take a look at something within ourselves, because sometimes when we don't allow the foreigner, so to say, there is every sense that something will not degenerate. Walter Rodney, in his book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, narrated a lot of way, prank, and virtually everything they did to conquer Africa. But the truth of the matter is, even ever since after that, what are we doing? During the slave trade, why are the people selling their brothers to the whites at the coast? Who are the people taking virtually everything we have and sell it to these white men? So automatically, we can't give all the blame to them. We have allowed them, but notwithstanding, that one will never be an excuse for whatever they perpetrate in Africa. They also have a blame. In fact, most of the coup that is happening, just like I mentioned, in Anglo-Francophone country nowadays, is as a result of that particular thing, just because of their own benefits. A lot of Anglophone countries today are still spending money being printed in far away France. Yes, Francophone, in far away France. What's the essence that there's a lot of policy that he has to tailor with what they want? And some of these countries, even in Asian countries, there's no any coup or there's no any insecurity or any insurgent that will happen that you won't trace the hand of this particular either organization or whatever. And this is what even brought in the far olden days, the UAC. We all know what they perpetrated here. Those of us that know the UAC, just because of their own economical interest. But notwithstanding, if we did not come together, our own leaders too have their own particular faults, except we want to deceive ourselves. We have leaders that are greedy. We have leaders that are ready to sell our property to these particular people. And that's why they were being able. Now, China is gradually removing itself. Why? Because first and foremost, they unite themselves. And they are doing virtually everything in their own particular interest. When they send their own children to either America or whatever, it's to go and learn and come back. But how many of us are ready for that particular one? Because we have a system that is not working until we try to put our house in order. These people will still penetrate. Until then, if we do not put our house in order, they are going to penetrate, and this is how it's going to continue. Now,
because of the time frame, in 1 minute, in 1 minute.
Okay. I don't know. I want to respond to your question. Hello. In response to your question, since I don't have much time, in a nutshell, it is very vital for the Ohamfia 18 boy to perform this ritual. Because first and foremost, the way the society is built and the issue of age grades, there is nothing you can do except to watch your age mates. Even a child that is 2 years old and is not crawling, everybody will be asking her, if you can look at it, don't you see your age mates? That's the way the Ohamfia society is structured. There is stiff competition. And once their age mates pass the initiation, they must do it. A child that hasn't done it will not even be within that small group that they are so young. Insults will be raining on it, will just be treated as nothing. The pressure is much. Okay, let's not. So it's very important, but I don't have time. Well, we can talk about it later. You can.
Thank you, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you so much. If you are still there, thank you so much for joining us for today. After that, I will end the session because the session is going to end automatically. It's going to end automatically. So I don't want it to end automatically. So thank you so much. Then we can have our primary discussion. Thank you for coming, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
What Brenda said, I think after the conference there is